Hello, everybody. I'm ready to start. I was just making sure that all the technicality was right, and I actually have a guest that's joining us this evening. I've received your questions, and what has been coming up the most is talking about financing and how to pay for university, essentially. So I've invited to be with us a guest. Let me just send that invitation out to Mr. Alex Rocha, and let's have him soon. And if any of you are just joining in, again, we're going to start this live cast. I've invited Mr. Alex Rocha. Hopefully he will join us. And we're going to be talking about OSAP. We're talking about, oh, he has joined. Great. Hi, Alex. How are you?
I'm doing well, and yourself?
Great. Thank you so much for joining us. As I had said, this is going live on Instagram, and we're going to be talking about financing university. What are the things that are important as far as for parents and students who are in grade 12, have applied to university, and now what do you do? How do you pay for university? How do you access some of the OSAP, the Ontario Student Assistance Program, government funding, financial aid, all of those different things. So I have a few things just to mention if you are joining us live and you do have a specific questions, you can add it in the comment or hit that like, or if you haven't subscribed to us yet, please join us. But I'm going to talk about today about what are some of the trends happening with OSAP in 2026. So the first question actually to you, Alex, is what are the key updates and trends in OSAP, the Ontario Student Assistance Plan for 2026?
Okay, as we probably heard in the news a way back that not too long ago, that the Ontario government has uh, basically flipped the way that the OSAP amount is calculated, as well as how it's distributed. So we have in the past it was mostly grants and less in loans, meaning loans that you had to repay back after you graduated. That's still the case for the loans, is that after 6 months after your graduation, you have to start making your payments back. It is really just, it can be just interest only payment back, but which can be utilized in the student's taxes to recuperate some of those interest only payments back, between 15 and 20% back. But the government decided that they're going to flip it. So instead of higher grant, lower loans, it's now higher loan and less grant. And grants, the tax treatment on grants is that there isn't any taxes. It's grants as long as the students are in school. So that's where the change has. So that means when a student graduates, they're going to have a larger debt that must be repaid than, say, someone who graduated last year. So
You said that scary word debt. That's what we're trying to prevent. That's what we're trying to avoid. So
yeah,
let's just go back a bit, I guess. What cost does OSAP actually cover?
many believe that the OSAP is like it's going to be 100% determined by just a tuition. And in most cases, that's what it does. That's what it's to cover tuition. But if you have a student who is going to go away to university, where they are on residence or eventually in student housing or any type of rental that they're going to be doing, literally away from home, those costs are actually entered into when they're doing the application. So it could be that 1 year, because they're on residence and maybe they got um, uh, um, a university grant, therefore their costs are lower. But second year, because they go off campus, their costs go up higher. So when they reapply, which they have to do every year, um, uh, that could go up higher. So it isn't just tuition, it's costs related to it, food, books, etc.
Okay, so I just want to make sure OSAP covers tuition, textbooks, supplies, housing, whether it's on residence or off campus, transportation, and some basic living expenses. Is that right?
That is correct. So that is what goes into the calculation when we're asking, or when the student is applying for OSAP.
Okay.
So when they say, well, the program that they attend, and that's one thing about OSAP, is when you have the actual program that you've been accepted to, once you put that in the application, it actually will bring up, and as of this month, all of the 2026 September tuition for all programs are uploaded on OSAP now, so that when you go in there and you pick that you got accepted to ABC University, such as, let's say, Queens, and you're in the engineering program, whether it's co-op or not co-op, that's one of the calculations. You click on it, it will say the tuition is this. Then they're going to say, are you on residence? And you would say yes. And then they'll calculate what they know, what the cost of being first year residents, that's already included in at the that's information that's sent to OSAP. And then additional amount would say, well, do you need cost of transportation? Um, do you have any savings already for education? Will someone be helping you out, or are you on your own? And while you go through all of those questions, it eventually will calculate and say, well, based on the fact that, one, you don't have any part-time income, two, you don't have any savings, three, you don't have anyone to help you, we will give you a larger OSAP. It doesn't mean it's a larger grant, it just means you have a larger loan to cover the cost of both education, food, housing, and any incidentals depending upon what program you're in.
So I'm sure you've talked to a lot of people. What would you say are the common mistakes that students make with OSAP?
I think what the common one is that they assume that they're going to get everything. And it could be that um, if they worked over the summer prior to starting, or they worked a full-time job or something, that could have an effect because it's based on your previous year's income. Whether your parents or the student's parents have income that they illustrate of high income. And when I say high income, household income of over 120 to 150,000 per year may affect in turn what they're going to get, unless they fill out the application stating, and that's, I'm paraphrasing what the actual question is, but literally is, um, are you on your own, or are you getting family to help? And if you say no, family is not going to help me, it becomes irrelevant how much the parents earn, because you're stating that I'm not going to get any help. Now, if you do have parents that wish to help, but their income is low, that definitely also can change what it is between grant and loan. But many try to leave these questions out, those answers out. Sometimes it's better, to seek some advice before you actually answer all those questions, because it isn't just, I'm in university, can I get some money? Those
Right,
are not
right.
the easy questions. It's an extensive, maybe 20, 25 questions. So I always tell my clients who are going into that position is that do the calculator. The
Right, right.
OSAP has the free calculator that you can go in there and do a trial run, and that
Yeah,
will give you an idea.
that's right.
And then before you actually pick, when you're eventually accepted, then you go in and you do the real one where you actually change the school, etc. But the trial calculator is very important.
And I want to highlight that for those of you who are wondering what should I do, go in and check that calculator. I'm going to add to some of the things you said, Alex, and just saying the common mistakes I hear about all the time about OSAP is students apply too late. And so that I hear quite often. It'll be September and someone will say, hey, how do I apply for OSAP? So applying late is one of the biggest ones, not reporting accurate financial information. You talked about that. So you do want, I mean, everything's connected, right? Everything's connected to CRA. It's very easy for them to check. So whether you are indicating that it's household or that you're not dependent, that you're independent, make sure that information is included. The other thing is, I know we were talking about, and you said all the things that are included that can be included in your OSAP calculator, but it doesn't cover everything. And I think sometimes parents think that, oh, okay, I'll make sure that my son or daughter or the student completes everything, and that then it's going to be like a full ride. By the way, full ride does not exist in Canada. It does exist in US. And you're laughing because I hear that all the time.
Yeah.
How do I maximize? And then something I know I've heard from you before is not understanding the repayment terms. And that is something that when you're applying to OSAP, it's such a good idea to understand, what does this actually mean after the student graduates? And you talked about the difference between a grant, a bursary, or a loan. And so in principle, OSAP is a loan. It does have to be repaid at the end. So if you're, I guess, tied into this, is when should students apply?
Well, that's a very good question, and it's true that some students will wait till the end because, as you know, like there's some that get late, waiting for that specific program that they want to get into, so that maybe they get accepted late into the season as opposed to earlier on. It could be that maybe they didn't know that I know I've heard some of it. I thought that the school would apply on their behalf,
Mm,
and that's not the case.
right.
But you can apply even before you get accepted in a specific program.
Oh, okay.
What it does is it starts the application, it sits there,
Mm,
and it saves it so that when you re-log in back in there, and that's the thing, that when you go in, you will create an OSAP number. So it's the first
right.
time for a student. You will go in, log in, create your user ID, your name, etc. It's based on your social insurance number. It will create a login for OSAP, and then
Hmm.
it'll create you your own OSAP account number. And
Yeah.
then when you're applying, you're going to go in now and log in and say, okay, I've now been accepted. So the first thing is to, create your login. So that's readily available.
Yes.
And then you can go in and say, well, I'm in between two colleges or universities. I don't know which one I'm going to take. So I'm going to start my application based on option A. And
Hmm.
then option B comes in and you get accepted and you want to go to that school. You just go back in there and change the school, but all your questions and answers will remain the same based on your
Right.
income, etc. And what will change will possibly tuition, and it could be also the cost. If you were looking at a local university versus away, and now you're choosing away, well, of course, that will change the calculator. And then you can hit submit, and it'll tell you right then and there, once you submit, that this is about 95% correct. And then you will get an email back saying, this is the actual amount you're going to receive. Because they have to do some checks and balances, like you've mentioned. Once you put your social insurance number and your parents, and one of the questions there are, if your parents are helping you out, do they agree to having their CRA checked, basically to verify that if you wrote that your parents' household income was 150,000, when they check with SCRA, it should be 150,000. Now, if you say that your parents are not helping you, because we also have matured students
Hmm.
involved that,
Hmm.
they don't have, they're in their 20s or 30s or 40s applying, it's probably their own income, but
Yeah.
they may not have income to actually go back to school. So they would say that they don't have any help from parents. So
Hmm.
therefore, their income is stated based on the social insurance number. Well, what's their income? If they say that's under 12,000 because they're only part-time income, well, that will definitely have a change in the calculator. Um, it's not to say that if you don't do it early enough that the money will run out. It isn't that way with OSAP. It will remain there.
Hmm.
Um, it just I would recommend that as soon as possible, even before you get accepted, to start the application
Yeah.
process.
And I'm gonna reiterate what you said earlier is you have to do this every year anyway. So I think the other piece that sometimes happens is, well, situation changes, financial situation changes. So OSAP is something that they would be applying every year. But OSAP isn't everything. So I want to touch on a few other things because there's some questions about like what are the smart ways to finance your university education. So let's talk about the bigger picture, not just OSAP. Um, but more about the planning, because I did have some questions from students who were, or parents, I should say, from students who were still in grade 10. So, what's the best way for families to plan financially for university? What are the things that if your student is still not of university age, they may still be in grade 9 or much earlier, even. That would be great, wouldn't it, if people started
Mm.
thinking about this at birth? But we know they don't. So let's just assume they're in grade 9. And the question is, what's the best way for families to plan financially?
Okay. Yes, OSAP is not the only thing. So hopefully there are some family savings. In addition, there are outside of the OSAP and outside of the university, there are, as you would know, and about other grants or other scholarships that are available. That can be whether it's education scholarships or any type of music scholarships or literature scholarships, or even yes, Canada does have a very small amount of sports scholarships. It isn't
Mhm.
like the free ride that Helen, you mentioned in the past. That's the American thing that we hear about.
Mhm.
So it isn't completely covered, but there is some kind of amount, whether it's 1,000 or etc.
Mhm.
But yes, if families being in the industry for over 25 years, we've always decided that education savings plan is one of the key things. So they're called RESPs, and where you the parent will contribute into the plan. Maximum is 2,000 per year, and they would receive a grant, a 20% grant. In the full scale of it all, the government would give up to $7,200 based on 20% of what that's 20% of what the parents have put in. And I say parents, it can be grandparents, uncles and
Right,
aunts,
right.
etc. But the idea is that is a savings. Now, normally within investing or savings, you need time. So
Mm,
10, 15 years would make the ideal. If you are about to start university, starting up an education savings plan months before you start school, it's not going to happen because the grant is based on receiving it under the age of 17.
okay.
So at that point in time in grade 12, most are either 17 or about to turn 18. So there wouldn't be the possibility of getting grants. Parents may have been putting money aside on other ways or other vehicles, maybe a TF tax-free savings account, maybe a GIC, maybe
Now you're going
grandparents.
into all sorts of financial terms, and I'm going to have to invite you back to explain all those. But I,
Okay.
I just want you to explain the RESP and why they matter. Like, so I know it's one of the most effective ways. Can you explain how that works and why the RESPs matter for those parents who are asking about early on?
Well, the as mentioned before, it's like it is 20% grant. So if you were doing it on your own, if the parents were doing it on their own, they put $2,000 into a savings account. Um, uh, then and say it was in a savings account earning 1%. It will continue to earn 1%, and every year they put $2,000. So if it's 10 years of investing, they probably put $20,000 into, or $1,000 a year, 10 years. It's at $10,000.
Do those funds grow tax free?
In an RESP, it would grow tax free. And in
Okay.
addition to the $10,000 that was there, the government would have given them 20%. So
Okay.
outside of the RESP, they would have $10,000. Inside the RESP, the exact same $10,000 that the parent invested would have 12,000 because the government would have put in 20% on their behalf.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, it would grow tax exempt. So
Okay.
RESPs grow tax exempt, just like tax-free savings account. The only difference between a tax-free savings account and an RESP is, first of all, you have to be 18 to own a tax-free savings account. And
Okay.
for an RESP, you're, as long as the child is 6 months old, they can have an RESP.
Oh,
It would
wow.
be
That
registered in
early.
the
Okay.
parent's name,
Okay.
in trust for the child, which would eventually be the owner of that plan when they
Right.
go to university or
Okay.
college.
So I'm just checking my notes because I don't want to lose everyone with all that financial talk. But my notes were that the government contributes to this Canada Education Savings Grant, like you said. So the RSP, why it matters is those funds grow tax-free. And then when it's time to withdraw those funds, when the student actually goes to university, they're taxed at the student's lower income level, right?
Correct. Look at that. See, that
Okay.
is so true, and that's why we were saying, well, so it's the parents put the money in, they get the grant, so 20%. So it literally means that that investment grew at 20%. That's how I look at it, because the
Yes.
grant is non-taxable for the parent. But you're
Right.
correct. When the student goes to school, to university, and they pulled out that money to pay for the tuition, the amount that comes out, if it is the grant portion that comes out first, that is taxed in the student's bracket. So if the student has no income and they have OSAP loans and education savings plan, basically that money will come out. They report it the following year in their taxes, but they don't have to pay any income tax because the threshold is $15,000 is the initial amount that you don't have to pay any tax on. So if they pull that out, the grant amount, yes, they have to report it, but it's at the child or the student's tax bracket and
Okay.
not the parents. Correct.
Good, 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 good. Um, a question I had from a parent is, should the student work during university? What do you usually say to that? I know for me there has to be a balance, but what are the benefits of a student working during university?
Well, that's where we each student will be different. Some may
Mhm.
need to work for that, but if in regards to regarding the education savings plan, will it affect or will the loan be affected, the OSAP, when they're working? As long as they keep their income down to somewhere where it is part-time income, and maybe it's in the range of under the 12,000 mark, which would come out to roughly about $1,000 a month, it would not affect their OSAP in that respect, even when they reapply the following year, because they understand that if that's probably for everyday expenses, maybe additional groceries, maybe some transportation that isn't covered, or lab fees or anything that isn't covered, or they didn't receive funding from OSAP to cover those. So that's
Mhm.
fine. If I think where we get to where we seeing it, or I'm seeing it, is those that are in the co-op programs.
Okay.
So then there's a year that they will not receive grant, or I mean OSAP, because they their co-op pay may have put them into a higher tax bracket, maybe over the $25,000 mark.
Right,
So when
right.
they reapply for the second or third year of OSAP, and they say, well, what's your income? And then they say, well, your income is too high.
Right.
So you don't accept. But then that's okay because they got income that's theirs, and
Mm,
they don't have to repay back that income, so their
right.
loan will be lower. It doesn't disappear. It just means that the new amount that they receive is actually lower.
Okay.
And we've seen that with a lot of co-op students that
Mhm.
they apply one year and then they get it, but the following year they don't. But then they apply the third year, etc., and so forth. But that is true. If you end up working in the summer at a full-time job, it could affect your
Mhm.
OSAP loan into the following year. That is correct.
About the part-time, I will say, having worked in post-secondary for almost 25 years, the one thing that I think students and parents don't realize is a huge way, rather than a student sort of working off campus, having to deal with, a supervisor that doesn't understand deadlines or exams, is every school, as long as you've applied to OSAP, even if it's $1, then you are eligible for part-time work on campus. It's called the Work Study Program.
Hmm.
And it's such, I mean, I know I supervised, oh, I don't know, dozens and dozens of students over the years, actually. Each year there had to be a few. And those are students who apply, who have applied for OSAP. They're eligible for on-campus jobs. Usually they work about, 10 hours maximum, 15 some, but some may be as little as just 5 to 7 hours. And there's roles on campus with supervisors who are understanding of when you need more time for studying or whatever that schedule may be. And you're still getting experience, which is really good. And you're getting, I would say, a paycheck to help with those extra costs that either parents, guardians, OSAP doesn't cover. Now, I have to think back. I didn't know when I went to university, and I know it was ages, but I didn't understand OSAP. Certainly my parents didn't. Um, I, I, I did, I paid for my university with lines of credit. And um, can you talk a little bit about student lines of credit as another way to finance university? I'm not saying it's the best. I learned the hard way. It wasn't the best. But can you tell me, or can you tell us a little bit about student lines of credit?
Okay, yes, that's definitely another option in regards to if OSAP is not enough or is insufficient to cover the costs. There are most financial institutions do have student lines of credit,
Hmm.
meaning that it's not it may not be a large amount. It could be maybe between 5 or 10 or maybe even 15,000, which will give you enough to pay your tuition for that specific year or cover the difference or maybe help you pay your rent. And then knowing that full well that you are working part-time or you are working in the summer, which would offset or pay down some of that line of credit. And lines of credit are revolving, meaning
Mm.
that as you pay it down, it doesn't disappear. It just
Oh,
it gives you it's revolving or reaccessible fund. So if you had a $10,000 line of credit and you put your entire tuition or your fall tuition into it, and then when spring came along, you put in your spring one, and then when you came in the summer, you worked over the summer that you paid down half of your line of credit. You can now go back and get the additional fall tuition to cover that based on that.
okay.
Why student loan or student lines of credits are readily available is because first, the banks are understanding in that respect,
Mhm.
and they also want you to be a client eventually.
Right.
So they offer you a student line of credit. Now, it is a lower interest rate than a regular line of credit. So it's not, but the difference is you're paying it the moment you pull the money out. So if today you pulled out $500 to pay for a lab or whatever that you did at university, and then at the end of the month, there's an interest payment that's due. So
And
there you have to pay that back. Unlike OSAP, where
yeah.
it's at graduation, is when you pay
Mhm.
back that loan. Lines of credit are due, at least the interest is due right the month after that you took the money out. Money out.
Okay. Okay. So not the first line of options, as many of us have learned over the
Yes,
years. All right. I have a question here, and it's from PTS Berg. What's the best way to find scholarships? I'm going to answer that
that's
because,
you.
yep, I will definitely answer that. But I want to finish up this section with you, Alex, while I have you here about financing in, which is almost comes to my last question for you is what's your advice to reduce student debt?
Student debt, are we talking about after they retire, after they graduate?
Or no, just even as they start. Like, so if you
It's
know, a
budget.
student starting university. Oh, go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a budget. There's no other way of doing it. Like, um, hopefully they did the budget before they applied for the university that they wanted to, so they know what the costs are going to be involved and where they're going to find funds. I know that that is the key one, and once they have a budget in place, they need to now figure out where they're actually going to pay that out. So to many, it's the at least they know the true cost of the education, the true cost of living at home or living out of home around the campus. To many, rent is very expensive outside of the campus, and how do they, lower the cost? Is they have roommates, whether it's
Right.
two, three, four, five. Some they rent an entire house, divide it by five, and now their cost is half of what if they were renting an apartment by themselves. So it's literally making a budget on what your education costs are, what your food costs are, and what your actual rent or residence costs are. And then one most people forget is there's entertainment in there. And
Right,
I'm not
right.
saying
Yeah,
all the kids
yeah.
should enjoy them. They have to enjoy themselves, but it could be that instead of buying just groceries, that they actually go out and 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 go to a restaurant and order food, or go to an outing where there is that they have to
Mhm.
spend some money. So it is literally budgeting that should have in place, so they understand where they're going to find the money involved and how they're going to cover the costs going forward.
So for students and parents, the best way to reduce student debt, have a budget, apply for every grant and scholarship
Yep.
possible. I'm going to talk about that. I know people say, should I live at home to save money? Definitely that does help, but also there's so much about the first year experience that I'll have a whole other episode on that, other live stream on that, about the importance or how uh, rich the first year experience becomes if you're living in residence. Budget early is the number one, and avoid unnecessary expenses. I know you were talking about
Yeah.
entertainment, and of course that's understandable, but we all know the difference between, and I think you've talked so much about needs and wants. I want to go straight to scholarships. I know there was that question, and that was the one thing I really wanted to talk about today. So I'm going to talk right now about what's the difference between a scholarship, a grant, and a bursary. So scholarships often are based on merit. What does that mean? That means grades, leadership experience, achievements, merit meaning something they've achieved, they've completed. Grants are usually income based, so they often go through OSAP. And grants you don't have to repay. So based on that information that you submitted to apply for your OSAP, they will have that financial information necessary to make a decision, should some of this continue as a loan that you've applied for OSAP, or should it be a grant? Bursaries are a third way to finance university, and those are also financial needs, but they're often not necessarily attached to the school. They could be different organizations, schools, and there's a whole series of those. If you're following Azul, which I encourage you to do, and you go on our website, you'll see a whole section about scholarships, grants, and bursaries. What should students start with? The first thing that you should start with is start with the university website. So if you've received an offer from ABC University, as you said, you know, every single institution will have, you so far been looking only at admissions and applications. Now you want to pivot and look over at the financial aid, or it could be called awards and scholarships. There's so many different ways that it's called, but you want to go to the university website and see. They will have a list of all of their interest scholarships, their different separate. Sometimes they have for different degrees, for different programs, but the university website is the first place to check. And
Mm-hmm.
that financial aid office, that's what they're there for. That's what they want. They want you to call and say, okay, I've been accepted to this program. How do I find out more about the specific university websites? And the advice I often say to students is, you can't assume the university knows that you want a scholarship. You have to, in some cases, go on the website and indicate that you're interested in being considered for scholarships, or for some, it might be a short application um, indicating sort of what you're looking for. Then, of course, there's your own guidance office at school. They might have information that they send out. And then the biggest one are online databases. Uh, Asking about scholarships is the number one question I get asked all year round. Can you help me find scholarships? Can you help me find scholarships? Well, I don't go out there looking for scholarships. I'm the one that says, please apply to scholarships, because there are so many scholarships that don't receive enough applications. Where should you start looking? Well, if you're looking at scholarshipscanada.com or .ca is one of the biggest databases. I mean, even just do a Google search, Scholarships Canada, Student Awards. Do a Google search of your program, of your school. There are thousands and thousands of scholarships. All of them have different criteria. The databases are great because if you sign up, you will specifically say what you're looking for. Everything from your program to what's your criteria, what are your grades, and they will send you emails directly to your email account about upcoming applications. So it's not something that I find scholarships. Then you want to think about, okay, how do you prepare a strong application? And this is where it's very important to be clear, to be authentic, and to also have a story. Those applications, as much as I said, so many of them don't receive enough applications, you want yours to stand out. You want the scholarship committee who's reading your application to say, okay, this person meets the criteria based on what we're looking for. So you want to, so many of these scholarships now are based on leadership. They're not necessarily just grades. And that I hear a lot from parents. Well, my son or daughter only has 80s. It's like, well, there's no such thing as only has 80s. That's great already. But also look at what else they're involved in. Are they involved in sports? Are they involved in volunteering, involved in arts, music? There's so many different things that they can. Community involvement is a big one. I know the high schools require that all students complete at least 40 hours of volunteer environment or volunteer hours, pardon me. Most students do more than that. And I would encourage you to do that because you're going to get such good stories then to apply for scholarships. The well-written applications is so important. I think where I worry often, and you must hear this too, Alex, is parents just say, where are the scholarships? How do I get my son or daughter scholarships if they have not been involved, if they have not, either have substantial volunteer leadership or great grades? That's different. Of course, then you need to go to OSAP because for scholarships, they will be looking at certain criteria. When should students start applying? I say start researching in grade 11. Please don't leave it to the spring of, you've got the offers. I think a lot of students think that you only apply to scholarships after you receive acceptance. And that's the case of the university ones. But
Yes.
there are other scholarships that you can start researching and have everything prepared that when grade 12 starts and you're preparing those applications, especially for the ones for competitive programs that require a lot of documentation and essays, it's those essays that will help you submit your applications to scholarships. So that then throughout grade 12, you are consistently applying, and to apply to as many as possible. Because my saying is often, let's say it takes about an hour to 2 hours, maybe even 3 hours to submit that application to a scholarship. But if that scholarship is 1,000 or 3,000 or 5,000, it is totally worth it. Grade 12 is the best time to get any type of money, because the amount of time I don't think you can get any jobs paying $1,000 an hour, unless you know of Alex.
No, I don't. That I don't.
No. No. So, and then the other thing is, it's not just in grade 12. Um, you keep applying to them in first year, second year, third year. There are so many different ones that they are reoccurring, but you still need to mention to them. So start applying, start researching ahead of grade 12, apply consistently, contact your school, financial aid, scholarships, office. They are there to help you. They want to make sure that post-secondary is accessible, as much as they can. The common myth that I hear the most about scholarships is that it's only about grades. It's not. It is, if you've been volunteering, there are scholarships based on your cultural background. They're based on financial need. They're based on specific career paths. I just saw one today that was about women in aerospace. There's ones on based your cultural background. There's a lot of different scholarships based on career based, in accounting, in engineering. All there's so many. So you talked greatly about everything from OSAPs
Mm.
to RESPs. You also talked about how to lower their debt, start budgeting. I talked about scholarships, grants, bursaries. I guess I'm just going to summarize it with the final takeaways. And the key, which I heard you saying quite a bit, start early and stay organized. You talked about RESPs as early as 6 months. So that's definitely early.
Well, that's the key thing that that education savings plan, and they always say, well, as soon as I amass or get a certain amount of savings, I will start a plan. You can start an education savings plan with $50, and then you would have got 20% from the government, which is $10, and then build from that point on. But yes, the earlier the better, because there is a timeline that, at age 16 is the last year you contribute, 17 is the last year to get grant, and then 18 is when they're in university or college. So that's when they're going to start taking the funds out. So it needs time to grow. It also needs time in order to obtain the grant that you're going to get from the government.
It,
And scholarships, this is another thing that brought to mind that you mentioned about scholarships. A lot of people forget, and a lot of people don't know, that they're even the parents' own employers do
mm,
have something as that, even it's $500 or $1,000, that even the parents don't know about, because it
yes.
could be a large firm with 500, 600 employees, and no one's ever mentioned that, oh, by the way, that if your kid is going to college, university, or post-secondary, that they have an opportunity. And sometimes it is just filling the name out.